The night was heavy with the scent of summer plums. A lone scholar, his robes dusted from the road, followed a narrow path through the fields. The hour was late, and the village lanterns had long since dimmed. Mist rose from the earth, curling like pale smoke, and the moon hung low, its light shimmering across the ground like spilled silver. It was then that he saw her. She stood at the edge of the path, framed by the swaying branches of willow trees. A young woman, dressed in flowing white silk, her face pale as carved jade, her eyes wide and luminous. She smiled, not broadly, but with the subtle warmth of someone who seemed to know him already. With a graceful tilt of her head, she beckoned him closer. The scholar hesitated. He had heard the warnings. On lonely roads, spirits walked. Foxes could take the form of women, their beauty flawless, their charm irresistible. Ghosts of maidens wronged might wait in silence, longing to entangle men in bonds of desire and despair. And yet, in that moment, his caution faltered. Her beauty was too vivid, her presence too alive. He felt not fear, but a pull, a longing deeper than hunger or thirst. "Come," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. "Rest and let me care for you." He followed her into the night. The Cabinet of Strange Tales. This scene could have been drawn directly from Liaozhai Zhiyi, or Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, the great 17th century collection by the Qing dynasty writer Pu Songling. The book, comprising nearly 500 short stories, became one of the most beloved and unsettling treasures of Chinese literature. Pu Songling gathered these tales from folk legends, rumors, travelers' whispers, and his own imagination. But he did more than record them. He shaped them into miniature works of art, half parables, half ghost stories, where love and death, beauty and horror constantly intertwine. Ghosts, foxes, and desire. One of the most striking features of Liaozhai Zhiyi is the recurring presence of female spirits, fox spirits, and ghostly seductresses. These figures were not always monstrous. Often they were gentle, cultured, even affectionate. They recited poetry, played the lute, and offered comfort to lonely scholars. Yet beneath their beauty lay danger. Some drained their lovers of vitality. Others led men into ruin, leaving them broken or vanished without trace. In these stories, desire itself becomes the trap. What appears as tenderness can transform into a curse. What begins as intimacy can end in decay. Pu Songling used these figures to explore not only the supernatural, but also the most vulnerable corners of the human heart, a mirror of society. For readers of the Qing dynasty, these tales were not more than entertainment. They reflected anxieties about morality, temptation, and the frailty of men who could be undone not by swords or armies, but by a glance, a smile, a whispered invitation. In a society bound by Confucian ideals of restraint and purity, Pu Songling dared to write of desire, masked in allegory, cloaked in the supernatural. Okiku in Japan counted plates from the bottom of a well. Yuki-onna lured men into snowy nights. But in China, through Pu Songling's pen, the ghosts and foxes seduced with poetry, beauty, and intimacy so delicate that men walked willingly to their fate. Thus begins our journey into Liaozhai Zhiyi, not simply a book of strange tales, but a labyrinth where eroticism and horror intertwine, where the promise of love is inseparable from the shadow of death.
The pages of Liaozhai Zhiyi are haunted not by armies of the dead or grotesque demons, but by figures far subtler and far more dangerous. Again and again, Pu Songling returns to the image of the beautiful woman who is not what she seems. Sometimes she is a fox spirit in disguise, sometimes the ghost of a maiden who died young, sometimes a celestial being who has slipped into the mortal world. But always she appears in the same way, luminous, graceful, and impossibly alluring. The archetype of the fox spirit. Among these figures, none is more famous than the Huli Jing, the fox spirit. In Chinese folklore, foxes were believed to live for centuries, gaining magical powers as they aged. After 100 years, they could take human form. After 1,000, they might ascend to heaven as celestial beings. But along the way, many of them chose another path, that of seduction. In Pu Songling's tales, the fox woman is not a snarling beast. She is refined, intelligent, and devastatingly beautiful. Her hair falls like silk, her eyes gleam with mischief, and her voice carries the softness of autumn wind. She often appears to scholars alone at night, offering companionship, conversation, and eventually intimacy. But always she appears in the same way, luminous, graceful, and impossibly alluring. Ghostly maidens. Alongside fox spirits are the ghostly maidens, the spirits of women who died before fulfilling their earthly fates. In Confucian society, a woman's role was often defined by marriage and family. To die unmarried or without children was considered a tragic incompleteness. These restless souls, in Pu Songling's imagination, returned to the world not as shrieking horrors, but as graceful figures, eager to experience the intimacy denied to them in life. They approached scholars in lonely inns or appeared in moonlit gardens, their presence gentle, their intentions cloaked in mystery. For the men who encountered them, the experience was not always fearful. Often, they welcomed the visit, mistaking it for a gift of companionship. Only later did they realize the cost. Their strength waned, their spirits faltered, or they disappeared entirely into the arms of the dead. Seduction through refinement. What sets Pu Songling's spirits apart is that they rarely seduce with overt sensuality. Instead, their power lies in refinement. They are learned in poetry and music, quick with wit, graceful in every gesture. In a society where real women were often bound by propriety and silence, these spirits offered something different, intimacy without restraint. A fox woman might sit beside a scholar, pour him wine, and discuss philosophy until dawn. A ghostly maiden might ask to hear his verses, then respond with lines of her own, her voice trembling like the strings of a Qing. It was not only their beauty that entrapped men, but their ability to make them feel seen, understood, and cherished. This subtlety made the seduction all the more dangerous. The scholar, proud of his intellect, believed he was engaging with an equal, perhaps even a soulmate. He did not realize until too late that the mind he admired belonged to no mortal woman. The feminine as supernatural. The recurrence of these figures points to a deeper cultural truth. In the Chinese imagination, the feminine was often linked to the supernatural. The yin principle, dark, soft, mysterious, was associated with women, the night, and the unseen. To encounter a woman in the twilight, especially one of extraordinary beauty, was to step into a liminal space where reality blurred with the otherworldly. Pu Songling exploited this cultural association masterfully. His readers knew that beauty in the dark could never be trusted, and yet they read on, captivated, unable to resist the pull of these spectral lovers, just as the scholars within the stories could not resist their touch. Between blessing and curse. It is important to note that not all Pu Songling's seductresses were purely malevolent. Some foxwomen truly loved their human companions, offering them loyalty and even helping them succeed in life. Some ghostly maidens brought comfort without destruction.
vanishing before dawn with only a trace of perfume left behind. But this ambiguity was the essence of the horror. How could one tell the difference? Was the woman at your side a blessing or a curse? Was her affection genuine or merely the mask of a spirit feeding upon your soul? This uncertainty made every encounter a gamble, every embrace a step into shadow. A reflection of male desire. At the heart of these tales lies a reflection of male longing. The scholars who populate Liaozhai Zhiyi are often lonely, poor, or powerless. In life, they might struggle for recognition, fail the imperial exams, or live in obscurity. In Pu Songling's stories, they are suddenly desired, chosen by women of unearthly beauty. The spirits embody what these men craved most: companionship, validation, and intimacy. But Pu Songling twists this fantasy into caution. The very thing that fulfills their desire becomes the agent of their destruction. Thus, the seductive spirits of Liaozhai Zhiyi are more than characters. They are mirrors, reflecting both the hopes and the fears of an age. They remind us that to seek love in shadows is to risk finding only emptiness, and that what seems most beautiful may be the most dangerous.
If Pu Songling's spirits endure in memory, it is not only because they were beautiful. It is because they knew how to transform beauty into a weapon, intimacy into a snare. Their methods were subtle, refined, and deeply psychological. To study their stories is to map the mechanics of seduction in one of its most haunting forms, a mixture of tenderness, intellect, and hidden hunger. The first encounter. The beginning was almost always the same. A scholar, traveling at night, would stumble upon a lone woman. Sometimes she was seated beneath a willow, sometimes wandering by the edge of a deserted village, sometimes waiting by the lantern glow of a roadside inn. The strangeness lay in her perfection. Her robes were spotless despite the dust of the road. Her hair flowed in impossible smoothness, untouched by wind. Her face, pale as porcelain, seemed to glow faintly, as if the moon itself favored her. Yet instead of fear, the scholar felt comfort. The woman's presence was gentle, her voice low, her smile faintly sorrowful. She seemed less like a predator and more like someone in need, someone lonely, just as he was. The trap was sprung before he realized there was danger. The power of conversation. Unlike the crude seductresses of popular folklore, Pu Songling's spirits seduced with words. Many of them were masters of poetry and wit. They listened to the scholar's verses with genuine attention, then responded with couplets that revealed equal or greater mastery. In a society where men often dismissed women as intellectually inferior, the shock of finding a woman who matched or surpassed them was intoxicating. For the scholar, it was not merely her beauty that captivated him, but the fact that she understood him, his frustrations with the exams, his longing for recognition, his solitary nights spent over ink and parchment. She offered not only her body, but her mind, and in that offering, he found what he thought was love. The subtle gestures. Seduction was not only in words, it was in the way she poured his wine, the way her sleeve brushed against his hand, the way she lowered her gaze and then lifted it again, letting her eyes linger just a moment too long. These gestures were calculated to create the illusion of intimacy. They suggested that she was not merely polite, but affectionate, not merely attentive, but devoted. For a man unused to affection, these small signs were overwhelming. One story tells of a fox spirit who appeared to a young scholar night after night, never asking for more than conversation. She laughed at his jokes, soothed his doubts, and praised his poetry. By the third night, he no longer thought of her as a stranger. She was his confidant, his companion, his secret solace. Only then did she draw closer, her sleeve slipping from her shoulder, her lips
parting as she leaned toward him. The promise of tenderness. The intimacy that followed was always painted with delicacy. Pu Songling never indulged in explicit description. Instead, he hinted, a sigh in the dark, the sound of silk rustling, the scent of orchids lingering in the scholar's chamber the next morning. What mattered was not the act itself, but the illusion it created, that the scholar had been chosen, that he was loved. The spirits rarely appeared as aggressors. They let the man believe that he was the one who desired, the one who pursued. In truth, every step had been guided, every hesitation anticipated, every longing answered with just enough encouragement to draw him deeper. The drain of vitality. Only later came the cost. A scholar might awaken weak, pale, or feverish. His brush trembled when he tried to write. His body, once strong, grew thin. Yet he could not stop himself. Even as he realized that the woman's embrace was harming him, he returned night after night, unable to resist the memory of her touch, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes seemed to shine only for him. In this, the seduction became not merely physical, but existential. The man's very life force was drawn out of him, disguised as affection. He did not feel attacked, he felt consumed by longing. The illusion of love. What makes Pu Songling's seduction so haunting is their ambiguity. Sometimes the spirit truly did love the man. She might nurse him when he was ill, encourage him to study, even sacrifice her own essence to protect him. Other times, she merely toyed with him, feeding until he was hollow, then vanishing without a trace. The scholar never knew which he had found until it was too late. But whether genuine or false, the effect was the same. He gave himself wholly, unable to separate passion from peril. Seduction as reflection. Ultimately, the spirit's art of seduction was a reflection of the men themselves. They fell because they longed to fall. They sought not just beauty, but escape from loneliness, from failure, from the rigid expectations of their world. The foxwoman or ghost maiden did not impose her desire upon them. She offered only what they already craved. This is why Pu Songling's stories still disturb. They suggest that the greatest danger lies not outside us, but within. That what destroys us is not the ghost's hand, but our own willingness to take it. Thus, in Liaozhai Zhiyi, seduction is never crude or obvious. It is a slow unraveling, a dance of words, glances, and promises that leads men willingly into the arms of death.
Pu Songling was not careless in choosing the kinds of men who encountered his seductive spirits. Again and again, his tales present the same archetypes. Men bound by circumstance and weakness, each carrying a vulnerability that made them ripe for the embrace of foxes, ghosts, and spectral lovers. There were not warriors or emperors, but men of the pen, scholars, officials, poets, and wanderers. The spirits seemed to single them out deliberately, as though their own longings made them visible to the unseen world. The lonely scholar. At the heart of Liaozhai Zhiyi stands the image of the lonely scholar. These men lived in small, rented rooms, surrounded by books and scrolls, their days consumed by preparation for the imperial exams. They were often poor, their families far away, their social status fragile. Loneliness was their constant companion. Nights passed in silence, broken only by the scratching of a brush on paper. Their only conversations were with dead poets, their only warmth the flicker of a candle. Into this void stepped the fox spirit or ghost maiden, a woman who not only admired their learning, but returned it with her own. It is no wonder these men succumbed. To be seen, to be praised, to be desired. It was everything they had longed for in silence. Their weakness was not lust, but the hunger for recognition and affection. And it was this hunger the spirits fed upon, turning admiration into addiction. The weary official.
Another common victim was the minor official, a man trapped in bureaucracy. These men traveled constantly, enforcing laws or collecting taxes in distant provinces. They lodged in unfamiliar inns, ate coarse food, and endured the hostility of strangers. For them, the sudden appearance of a beautiful woman in an empty inn or moonlit courtyard was more than temptation, it was relief. The foxwoman's smile seems to wash away months of duty. Her laughter erased the weight of scrolls and seals. She became a refuge from the drudgery of service, a reminder that life could hold sweetness even for men burdened by endless labor. But the cost of that sweetness was heavy. The official who lingered too long in her company often returned weakened, unable to fulfill his duties, or vanished entirely, his absence explained away as illness or misadventure. The wandering poet. Pu Songling also loved to place spirits in the paths of wandering poets and travelers. These men moved through landscapes of mountains, rivers, and ruined temples, seeking inspiration. Their hearts were open, their senses sharpened to beauty. For such men, the sight of a mysterious woman in a misty grove was irresistible. They saw not danger, but poetry incarnate. Many stories begin with a poet stumbling upon a maiden reciting verses alone, her voice trembling like a lute string in the night. Enchanted, he joined her in rhyme, believing he had found a muse, perhaps even destiny. But poetry could not protect him. The muse often revealed herself to be a spirit, and the poet, who once sang of longing, soon found himself drained by it, his verses silenced by the very presence that had inspired them. The ambitious youth. There were also young men, full of ambition yet untested by life. They dreamed of honors, riches, and recognition, but lived in obscurity. For them, the embrace of a spirit felt like proof of greatness. If a celestial beauty had chosen them, surely it meant they were destined for more. They mistook seduction for destiny, love for validation. Their eagerness blinded them, and they walked faster than others into the arms of the supernatural. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Patterns of weakness. Across all these types, the pattern is clear. The spirits did not waste themselves on men content with their lives. They chose those marked by loneliness, which made them crave companionship, weariness, which made them crave relief, romantic sensitivity, which made them mistake danger for beauty, ambition, which made them easy prey for flattery. It was not brute strength the spirits hunted, but fractures in the heart. They did not strike like wolves, they waited like shadows, slipping into the places where men were already hollow. A social mirror. In this, Pu Songling revealed not only the dangers of spirits, but the condition of men in his time. Scholars were isolated, officials overworked, poets rootless, youths desperate for validation. The supernatural lovers they met were less invaders from another world than reflections of their own unmet needs. The foxes and ghosts did not create desire, they exposed it. And once exposed, it consumed the man, leaving him unable to distinguish love from illusion, tenderness from destruction. Thus, the victims of Liaozhai Zhiyi are not merely characters in old tales, they are archetypes of human frailty, reminders that the deepest dangers come not from swords or storms, but from the hungers we carry quietly in our hearts.
In Pu Songling's world, love and death were never far apart. In fact, they were inseparable, woven into the very fabric of his strange tales. The women who appeared to scholars and poets, whether fox spirits or ghostly maidens, did not come bearing the violence of monsters. They came with warmth, grace, and intimacy. And yet, behind every smile, behind every whispered verse, there lingered the shadow of mortality. To embrace these women was to embrace a paradox, a love that nurtured even as it consumed, a tenderness that led inevitably to ruin, the sweetness of illusion. The early stages of these encounters rarely resembled horror. A scholar met a maiden who seemed as gentle as moonlight. They spoke beneath flowering trees or by the glow of a paper lantern, their conversation full of laughter and poetry. She poured his wine, played her zither, and looked at him as though he were the only man in the world. In these moments, death was unthinkable. The scholar felt alive in a way he never had before. His loneliness dissolved. His ambition seemed validated. His heart, once heavy with failure, now leapt with joy. He told himself that even if she were a spirit, even if she belonged to another world, love this pure must surely be a blessing. But Pu Songling's readers knew better. They knew that the sweetness was only the prelude, that every smile in his tales concealed a shadow. The slow drain. Love in Liaozhai Zhiyi often revealed itself as a kind of slow drain, a bleeding away of life disguised as affection. After nights with the spirit, the scholar awoke exhausted. His hands trembled when he tried to write. His face grew pale, his eyes sunken, and yet he returned to her. The paradox was cruel. The more he loved her, the weaker he became. The more he surrendered to her touch, the closer he moved toward his grave. But he could not stop. Her presence was addictive, her absence unbearable. It was here that Pu Songling's genius shone. He captured the truth that love itself can be destructive, that desire can consume not only the body, but the soul. His readers recognized this not as pure fantasy, but as allegory. How many men in real life had been undone by women they adored? How many had lost wealth, status, even health, chasing after intimacy? The ghost and fox were metaphors for love's devouring side. Death as an embrace. The moment of death, when it came, was rarely depicted as violence. It arrived like an embrace. The scholar might collapse in the maiden's arms, his lips still curved in a faint smile, or he might fade quietly in his chamber, the scent of orchids still lingering from her visit. Sometimes the death was literal, the man's spirit drained, his body left cold and empty. Other times it was metaphorical. He abandoned his studies, lost his chance at the exams, and slipped into obscurity, his life destroyed not by sword or plague, but by longing. In both cases, the imagery was the same. Love became indistinguishable from death. To hold the spirit was to hold one's own undoing. To kiss her lips was to taste mortality itself. The ambiguity of affection. What makes these stories even more haunting is that sometimes the spirits truly did love. Some fox women stayed by their human companions' sides, nursing them when they were ill, encouraging them in their studies, even sacrificing themselves to protect them. Their love was real, and yet even then it was tinged with danger. For how could a man embrace a woman who did not belong to his world without risking destruction? This ambiguity left readers unsettled. Was the spirit a lover or a predator? Was her affection genuine, or was it simply another mask? Even when love seemed true, it was doomed by the gulf between the living and the dead, the human and the supernatural. Horror in the gentle. Unlike Western tales, where monsters reveal their fangs and horror is born in sudden violence, Pu Songling's horror was quiet. It lay in the gentle things, in the brush of a sleeve, in the whisper of a sigh, in the touch that lingered too long. Death came not through terror, but through tenderness. That was what made it unbearable. The reader was left with a chilling realization that destruction might not look like claws or fire,
but like the softest smile, the delicatest touch, that the deadliest poison might be love itself. The cultural lesson. For the society of Pu Songling's time, these tales were more than entertainment. They were moral mirrors. Confucian ideals demanded restraint, discipline, and purity. To surrender to desire was to invite ruin. And so, through stories of foxes and ghosts, Pu Songling warned his readers, passion unchecked is fatal. Intimacy with shadows leads only to emptiness. Yet, at the same time, he did not write only as a moralist. He wrote as a man who understood longing. His stories reveal sympathy for the scholars undone by beauty, compassion for the spirits who reached out in loneliness. His horror was never cruel for its own sake. It was tragedy, the tragedy of longing for what cannot last. The eternal knot of love and death. Ultimately, Liaozhai Zhiyi teaches that love and death are bound together by the same thread. To fall in love with a ghost is to love something already gone. To embrace a fox spirit is to embrace illusion. And yet, men do it anyway. They cannot help themselves. That is why Pu Songling's tales still resonate, centuries later. Because beneath the supernatural lies a truth all humans know. Love is both joy and danger, both blessing and curse. It gives life meaning, and it carries within it the seeds of destruction. In the world of Liaozhai Zhiyi, this truth is made visible. The lover is also the reaper. The kiss is also the grave. And the greatest horror is not that men die in these stories, but that they die willingly, mistaking the arms of death for the arms of love.
Behind the whisper of fox spirits and the sighs of ghostly maidens, behind the allure of pale hands in perfumed chambers, Pu Songling's Liaozhai Zhiyi carried a weight that was more than fantasy. His tales were mirrors, polished with ink, reflecting the vulnerabilities of his society. They were not simply stories of seduction and death, but warnings, moral parables hidden within silken veils. The Confucian framework. 17th century China was governed not only by emperors and magistrates, but by the weight of Confucian ideals. Filial piety, restraint, discipline, and moral uprightness defined the framework of a good life. Scholars, the primary heroes of Pu Songling's tales, were expected to embody these values. They were to devote themselves to study, to prepare for the imperial examinations, and to serve the state with loyalty and self-control. But reality was harsher. Many scholars lived in poverty, studied endlessly without success, and languished in loneliness. The gap between ideal and reality created a hunger for recognition, companionship, and affection. Into that gap, Pu Songling placed his spirits. They were the temptation that tested Confucian discipline, the trial that revealed whether a man's learning was matched by his virtue. Desire as a trap. Each encounter with a spirit served as a test. Would the scholar remember his duties, his vows, his obligations to family and society? Or would he yield to the touch of beauty in the night, forgetting all in a moment of desire? Pu Songling portrayed the latter again and again. Men who surrendered to foxwomen or ghostly maidens often suffered not only physical decline, but also social ruin. Their studies faltered, their health collapsed, their ambitions dissolved. They became parables for readers, examples of how desire could devour a man more completely than any blade or illness. It was no accident that these seductions ended in weakness and death. In the Confucian worldview,
Yielding to passion meant losing control, losing balance, losing the very essence of what made a man upright. The spirits did not simply kill their lovers, they exposed their flaws. Lessons for the living. But Pu Songling was more than a preacher of morality. His warnings were not cold condemnations. Instead, they were nuanced, layered, sympathetic. He understood the human heart too well to write simple sermons. His tales whispered warnings rather than shouted them. To the young scholar, they said, "Beware of illusions, for what you crave most may destroy you." To the ambitious official, they said, "Duty neglected for desire will end in ruin." To the wandering poet, they said, "Beauty is fleeting, and to chase it may cost you your life." Each story was both entertainment and instruction. Read by candlelight, they thrilled the imagination. But when the lamp was extinguished, they lingered as cautionary echoes in the reader's mind. The ambiguous morality of spirits. And yet Pu Songling's genius lay in refusing to paint his spirits in black and white. Not every foxwoman was a predator. Some truly loved their human companions. Not every ghost maiden destroyed her lover. Some offered comfort before vanishing. This ambiguity deepened the warning, because how could one know? How could a man distinguish the loving spirit from the devouring one? How could he tell whether affection was genuine or only a mask? The lesson then was double-edged. On the one hand, beware, for desire may destroy you. On the other, even love itself, genuine and true, cannot escape the shadow of mortality. The line between blessing and curse was too fine to trust. Allegory of society. Readers of Pu Songling's time also recognized another layer. The spirits were allegories of society itself. The foxwoman who flattered a scholar before draining him resembled corrupt officials who promised favor only to exploit. The ghost maiden who offered comfort before vanishing echoed the fleeting rewards of ambition, gone as soon as they appeared. The tales were thus not only about supernatural lovers, but about the dangers of human life: greed, lust, corruption, vanity, and the endless search for validation. Pu Songling clothed these themes in silk robes and perfumed chambers, but beneath them beat the heart of social critique, entertainment and edification. This dual purpose explains the enduring power of Liaozhai Zhiyi. The stories entertained. Readers thrilled at the suspense of encounters, the beauty of the spirits, the eerie blending of tenderness and terror. But they also educated, reminding audiences of the values expected of them. The pleasure of reading was always tempered by unease, the sense that behind the fox's smile was not only danger, but a mirror of oneself. The whispered warning. What lingers most is the tone of Pu Songling's warnings. He did not thunder from the page like a preacher. He whispered like the spirits themselves. His lessons were not delivered in lectures, but in stories that left readers unsettled. They made them question, if I were the scholar, would I resist? Would I recognize the danger? Or would I too follow her into the night? This quiet method of teaching was more powerful than any sermon. For to read Pu Songling was not only to observe others' mistakes, but to feel one's own heart tremble with recognition. The haunting morality. In the end, the moral weight of Liaozhai Zhiyi is inseparable from its horror. Its warnings are not separate from its seductions, they are born from them. To show the reader a foxwoman's beauty was to make him understand temptation. To show her embrace was to reveal the danger of yielding. To show her lover's death was to complete the lesson that desire unrestrained is ruin, and that love without wisdom can be fatal. This was the true brilliance of Pu Songling's tales. They were not only stories of ghosts and foxes, they were meditations on morality. Whispered in silk, painted in shadow, forever balancing between sweetness and sorrow.
Pu Songling lived in an age where open discussion of desire was constrained by Confucian propriety. The Qing dynasty emphasized order, hierarchy, and restraint. Sexuality was a subject veiled in silence, acknowledged only in coded ways, and love itself was often treated as duty rather than passion. To write directly of longing, intimacy, or bodily pleasures was to risk censure. And yet, in Liaozhai Zhiyi, page after page breathes with the presence of seduction, intimacy, and erotic undertones. How did Pu Songling achieve this? Through allegory. The cloak of the supernatural. By dressing desire in the garments of the supernatural, Pu Songling could explore themes that society forbade. A foxwoman's embrace was not simply a sexual encounter, it was a metaphor for temptation. A ghostly maiden's sigh was not only the sound of intimacy, it was the whisper of mortality. Readers could indulge in the thrill of these encounters without admitting to indecency, for they were, after all, just stories of spirits. The supernatural thus provided a mask. Beneath that mask, Pu Songling spoke openly about longing, about loneliness, about the deep hunger for connection that haunted men of his time. The foxtail and the ghostly pallor disguised what was, at heart, the most human of experiences: desire. The fox as the forbidden woman. The figure of the fox spirit itself was an allegory of forbidden femininity. Fox women were free in a way mortal women were not. They spoke their minds, played music, laughed openly, and offered companionship without restraint. For readers accustomed to the silence and seclusion demanded of real women, these spirits embodied a fantasy. A woman unbound by rules, bold in her affection, daring in her intimacy. Yet the fantasy was wrapped in danger. To love such a woman was to risk ruin. Thus, the fox symbolized both the allure of forbidden passion and the peril that came with indulging it. In this way, Pu Songling managed to critique the rigidity of social norms while also affirming their necessity. He showed that men craved what society denied them, but also that surrendering to such cravings could be destructive. Ghosts as lost possibilities. The ghost maidens carried a different allegory. They were women who had died too soon, denied the chance to marry, to bear children, to live out their social destinies. Their return to the world of men, seeking intimacy, reflected the unspoken truth. Countless women in Qing China were silenced, their desires erased by custom. In Pu Songling's hands, the ghost's embrace became a reclamation of that lost voice. The dead maiden could love freely in ways she never could in life. Her affection was tender, sometimes tragic, sometimes fatal. To the reader, she was both an object of pity and of desire. She symbolized not only death, but also the suppressed longings of real women, brought back in spectral form to haunt men who never considered them in life. Seduction as social critique. Through these figures, Pu Songling critiqued his world. The strict codes of Confucian morality demanded purity, chastity, and silence, but his tales revealed the cost of such repression. Men, starved of affection, became easy prey for illusions. Women, silenced in life, returned to death to seek what was denied them. The encounters between scholars and spirits symbolized the imbalance of a society that demanded too much restraint from human hearts. Thus, the eroticism in Liaozhai Zhiyi was never mere decoration. It was symbolic. Each glance, each sigh,
Each faint trace of perfume left behind carried the weight of allegory, the unspoken truths of desire in a culture that refused to name them. The language of suggestion. One of Pu Songling's great strengths was his ability to suggest without revealing. He did not write explicitly of bodies or acts. Instead, he used imagery, the rustle of silk, the flicker of a candle, the sound of a lute string plucked in the dark. These hints allowed the reader's imagination to fill the silence, creating a more powerful and intimate effect than any direct description. In this way, his tales mirrored the very nature of desire, never fully spoken, always lingering in suggestion, powerful precisely because it could not be named outright. Eroticism as horror. The blending of eroticism with horror was not incidental, it was deliberate. By intertwining the two, Pu Songling reminded his readers that desire itself carried danger. The thrill of intimacy could mask death. The sweetness of affection could conceal ruin. To read his tales was to feel both attraction and dread, to be pulled forward by longing as one shuddered at its consequences. This tension mirrored the lived reality of his readers. Desire was at once inevitable and forbidden, natural and dangerous. By cloaking it in allegory, Pu Songling gave voice to this paradox, turning it into art that both delighted and unsettled. The subversive power of allegory. Ultimately, the erotic allegories of Liaozhai Zhiyi were Pu Songling's quiet rebellion. He could not openly defy Confucian morality, but he could weave stories that revealed its cracks. He could not declare that men longed for freedom from restraint, but he could show it through the arms of fox spirits. He could not say that women's desires mattered, but he could let ghostly maidens return from the grave to claim them. In this way, his collection became not only a treasury of ghost tales, but also a document of human yearning. Yearning stifled by culture, resurrected in fiction, and made immortal in allegory. Thus, the eroticism in Liaozhai Zhiyi was never mere decoration. It was the language of critique, the whisper of what could not be shouted, the shadowed reflection of human longing. And it is precisely this blend of subtlety, suggestion, and allegory that gives the work its haunting power.
When the last candle flickers and the final page of Liaozhai Zhiyi is turned, what lingers is not the image of snarling demons or bloody ghosts. It is the quiet, unsettling paradox of beauty and dread. Again and again, Pu Songling presents us with the same figure, a woman radiant as moonlight, gentle in her touch, eloquent in her words. She offers what every lonely man craves: companionship, recognition, intimacy. And yet to accept her hand is to accept death. Love as the path to the grave. The lesson that emerges is stark but profound. Love and death are not opposites in these tales. They are companions. To embrace beauty in the night is to embrace mortality. To taste intimacy is to risk annihilation. Pu Songling understood that the most terrifying truths are not those shouted in violence, but those whispered in tenderness. His spirits kill not with claws, but with kisses. They leave not corpses twisted in horror, but bodies smiling faintly, as if they died in the arms of love itself. The mirror of desire. And yet these tales are not only about spirits, they are about us. The foxwoman, the ghost maiden, the spectral seductress, they are mirrors of human desire. They reveal what we hide from ourselves: the hunger for affection, the ache of loneliness, the longing to be chosen. In Pu Songling's world, men fall not because spirits are strong, but because their own hearts are weak. They crave, and in craving,
they open themselves to ruin. This is why his tales resonate across centuries. We may no longer believe in foxes with 9 tails or maidens who return from the grave, but we still know the dangers of desire. We still mistake illusions for love. We still chase what will consume us. The whisper of morality. Beneath the lace of allegory lies morality. Pu Songling did not write only to frighten or to titillate. He wrote to warn. His readers understood. To abandon duty for passion is to lose one's path. To surrender to beauty without wisdom is to invite destruction. The fox's embrace, the ghost's kiss, these were not only supernatural dangers, but metaphors for the risks of real life. But his warnings were never cruel. They were tinged with sympathy. He knew that to long is human. He knew that even the wisest scholar might falter when met with a smile in the dark. His tales are not condemnations, but elegies. Elegies for men undone by longing, for women silenced in life, but given voice in death. The genius of ambiguity. What elevates Liaozhai Zhiyi beyond simple morality tales is its refusal to resolve the paradox. Not every spirit is malevolent. Some love truly. Some sacrifice themselves for their human companions. And yet, even love cannot save them, for in the end, they do not belong to the same world. Their intimacy, no matter how tender, is doomed. This ambiguity keeps the stories alive. They do not end with easy answers. They end with uncertainty, with questions that linger. Was she a blessing or a curse? Was her affection genuine or an illusion? Could love bridge the gulf between life and death? The lasting legacy. Centuries later, Pu Songling's tales still breathe with vitality. They have inspired operas, films, paintings, and endless retellings. They endure because they speak to something timeless. They are not simply about China of the 17th century. They are about the eternal tension between restraint and desire, between duty and passion, between love and death. Each story is a window into the human condition, cloaked in silk and shadow, whispered in the voice of a fox, sung in the sigh of a ghost. And through them, Pu Songling achieved what few writers dare. He gave voice to what society silenced. He turned longing into literature, desire into allegory, horror into truth. Conclusion. Liaozhai Zhiyi is more than a book of ghost stories. It is a meditation on what it means to long, to love, to surrender, and to perish. Its spirits are not merely monsters, but metaphors, beautiful, dangerous, unforgettable. They remind us that passion can be poison, that affection can conceal ruin, and that the most dangerous embrace may be the one that feels most tender. And so when the reader closes the book, they do not leave behind the fox woman or the ghost maiden. They carry them within, as whispers in the dark, as mirrors of their own desires. For Pu Songling's greatest truth is this: the strangest tales are not those of spirits, but of the human heart itself.